Shavua Tov. Hope everyone's doing well. We're continuing with Mesilas Yesharim. We are on chapter 13, which is the trait of precious or abstinence. And we've been learning about how just because something is not forbidden by the Torah doesn't necessarily mean it's something we should be engaged in. We mentioned last week the Ramban's explanation of the verse of Kedoshim Tiyu, that you should be holy. That in addition to all the technical commandments in the Torah, there's also a commandment for us to be holy. That means even if something is technically permitted, doesn't mean we have to engage in it. For example, a person could spend his whole day eating and drinking and stuffing his face and having relations with his wife, and he didn't violate any prohibitions in the Torah. He ate kosher food, he's allowed to have relations with his wife, but that isn't a holy way to live, just indulging the entire day in physical pleasures. So we're continuing with that concept. And we are on page 273 of the Art Scroll edition, which we use. And, okay, so let's start from there. Od Amru. Furthermore, it says, Tzadik oichel l'soiva nafsho. A righteous person eats to satisfy his soul, to satisfy his nefesh. Zeh Chizkiyahu melech Yehuda. This refers to King Chizkiyahu, the king of Judah. Amru olav, it said on him, Shtei agudos shel yarak v'litra. So Chizkiyahu, the king of Judah, every day they would bring in front of him bundles of vegetables and a litra of meat. It's a certain measurement of meat. And the Jewish people some of the Jewish people would mock him, saying, this is what a king eats. The idea is that Chizkiyahu ate, even though he was a king, he ate a very limited amount. He only ate what he needed for the day, what he needed to sustain himself, even though he was a king, and he could have had a magnificent meal every day and had fantastic banquets. He just ate what he needed, to the point where people weren't even mocking him. But he was doing what's right. He was living with this midah of precious, that he separated himself from what was allowed to him. He was allowed to eat a lot if he wanted, but he didn't do that, which is very praiseworthy. Compare this to the kings and the banquets that the Romans used to have. The Roman aristocrats, they would stuff their faces so much, and then they would make themselves vomit, just so they could have room for more food. That's the opposite of what we should be doing. But King Chizkiyahu, who was a king, a Jewish king, ate just what he needed to sustain himself. I was just mentioning to someone that I think Rav Aaron Leib Steinman, who was one of the greatest rabbis of the generation, who passed away a few years ago at like 104 or something like that. So I think he used to eat like a slice of bread and soup the entire day just to sustain himself. Now, I'm not saying we should do that, but just the idea. And he was such a happy person and such a caring person, cared for the entire Jewish people. Again, I'm not saying that we should go do that, but just to have this concept, whatever level we're at, just to only engage in to limit our engagement of physical things a little bit, that it shouldn't be our goal in life. That's the main idea I think we should, on our level, we should be taking out of this chapter, is that our main goal in life shouldn't be to satisfy our physical needs. Because he's going to talk about how when your goal in life is just to go to this restaurant and that restaurant, I want to go to this fancy place because they make the ribs a little differently, and I want to try that, and I have to go here to try that, then your whole life becomes just a pursuit of different types of physical pleasures, and that's not how a Jewish person is supposed to be living. Someone just mentioned to me that certain chefs, very fancy chefs, I don't know if this is, someone can check me if they're in the cooking industry, that they have seasoned pots. We learn in Yoreh De'ah and different parts of the Gemara that pots, they absorb taste. So that has to do with the pot is not kosher, whatever the halachas are. But there are certain chefs that actually buy these seasoned pots because they want their food to have that taste of something that was cooked previously many times in the pot. And they spend a lot of money on these seasoned pots. So if your tastes in food are getting that refined, and your taste in spirituality is not that refined, then that could be a problem. Okay, Od Amru. Furthermore, it says, B'Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who was one of the greatest rabbis of his generation, that he collected the Mishnahs, the Mishnayos that we have in them today. He collected them all into a cohesive book. So he was also very wealthy. But nevertheless, when he passed away, Shebashas Misaso, when he died, Zakaf Eser Esba'ot V'Amar, he put up his 10 fingers and said, Golev Yadua Lefanecha, Hashem, it's revealed and known before you, Shalo Nehanesi Mina Olam Hazeh Afilu Be'etzba Ketana Shali. I didn't gain enjoyment from this world, even from my little finger. So even though he was he was called Rabbi Judah the Prince. So if he's called the Prince, he was very wealthy. And even so, he didn't gain enjoyment from the physical world, even from even with his little finger. And the idea is that he was such a holy person that even though he was wealthy, and he could have had any physical pleasure which he desired, he only used the physical for his spiritual pursuits. His goal in life was to serve Hashem, because that's what we were put in this world for, and he only used his great wealth to serve Hashem. So we don't believe that a person has to be poor, right? That's not a Jewish belief, that a person, it's better to be necessarily be poor than wealthy. It's how you use your money, how you use what you have, what God gave you. God blesses many people with different talents. Some people he blesses with great wealth. So does a person use that wealth to just buy fancy things for himself and go on fancier vacations and go to fancier restaurants and just spend money for himself? Or, like Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, he used his money for other people, and he only used his money as a vehicle to serve God. Does a person use it to give tzedakah, to support Torah learning, to send his kids to yeshiva? That is the real test. But Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, one of the wealthiest and holiest people of his generation, could testify about himself that he didn't even benefit from the world with his pinky finger. Od Amru. Furthermore, it says, Ad she'adam ispala al divrei Torah she'ikansu b'toch me'av yispala al achilu shtiya shelo yikansu b'toch me'av. It says that if a person is going to daven, that Torah should enter his stomach, meaning a person wants to study for success in Torah, he says he should just as well pray that good food and drink should not enter his stomach. So, again, because we see these two opposites. If a person wants to be successful in Torah learning, which is a spiritual pursuit, he can't be focused in life on the physical. His goal has to be spiritual. If a person wants to daven, just like a person should daven for success in Torah, he should daven that good food and drink should not enter his system. He should only be eating and drinking in order to serve Hashem. And again, this is as a high level to every time to eat, to think that I'm only eating now to serve Hashem is a very lofty spiritual level. But even though we're not on that level, many of us are not on that level, still we can think, it doesn't hurt to think once in a while when we're eating, I'm eating now so that I can have strength to daven to Hashem, to learn Torah a little bit, to work so I can make a living and support my family and do mitzvos. Those are, when we have that little thought, when we're doing a physical act of eating, we sanctify what we're doing, and it makes it very, very special. But again, the idea is the goal in life shouldn't be just for wealth and physical pleasure and honor. Hein kol eila mamarim, all of these statements of the rabbis of which we read, morin beferish tzorech haprishus v'achovabo, teaches us the importance of precious and our obligation in it to abstain from certain things which are even allowed. Because everything we've mentioned, there's no prohibition in the Torah to go to a nice restaurant. But when that becomes a goal in life, that's not a proper way to live as a Jewish person, as a servant of Hashem. Omnam, al kol panim, nevertheless, tzrichim anu letaretz hamarim hefech. Nevertheless, we have to answer the other mamarim, the other statements of Chazal, which seem to say precious is not always a good thing. We mentioned last week, and the Ramchal said, he brought several statements that seem to say that forbidding things which are allowed upon oneself is not always a good thing. So we have all these statements which say that we should abstain from things which are allowed, but we have other statements which seem to show that it's not a good thing, and that we can't just walk around like a monk. So we're going to see, now the Ramchal is going to explain, there are certain types of precious which are good, certain types of ways where we should separate ourselves from things which are allowed, and other types of precious which are not good, and we should not be separating ourselves from those things. But I'll leave that as a cliffhanger because I don't think we're going to get to it this week. So please come back next week, and we'll, God willing, or the week after, he's going to get to it in a few pages, that we see sometimes it's good to abstain from things, and sometimes it's not good. But for sure, the good way is that our goal in life, the idea I think we should take out of this chapter is that our goal in life, we should think, what are we here for? What did God create us for? What does he want from us? I promise you that God doesn't want us to try every fancy kosher restaurant in the area. Even though you're allowed to go to kosher restaurants, you're allowed to enjoy yourself. But if that becomes a goal in life, then that is a problem. And our goals and our desire should always be for success in spirituality and getting close to Hashem and being a good Jew.